Welcome back, everybody. This is Cliff again with another unit in our Combat Boot Camp series. Today I want to talk to you about the important topic of actually resolving wounds and morale checks. So in our previous videos we've talked about different ways that your soldiers and the soldiers of your opponents might be hit by fire, which would include direct fire, indirect fire with artillery attacks, or even artillery attacks in an adjacent hex, or grenade attacks. There are a couple of different things you would need to be able to do here. We'll try to make this as straightforward as possible. Sometimes you'll need to take a morale check directly without even checking for wounds. This would be the case of if a grenade goes off in your hex or in an adjacent hex, regardless of whether you're hit or not, you have to take a morale check. Well, what is that morale check? The other way this could happen is if you have what I call a hurry order. In earlier episodes, I talked about Sherry, sneak, hide, rally, reload. Well, there's such a thing as hurry, which is hide, rally, reload without thinking about sneak. There are certain terrain where if you hide, rally, or reloading, you're only subjected to morale checks if you have a successful hit put against you. For instance, if Soldat Bach, where's my mouse? Here's my mouse. Put Soldat Bach in the rock. So poetic. And he's hiding. If we hit him with fire, the worst that can happen is he has to take a morale check. Or if Soldat Young here is in the building and he's rallying, let's give him another order. He's on rally or reload. If we hit him, the worst they have to do is take a morale check. So there's certain terrains like rock and buildings where the worst you can get is a morale check. Unless it's artillery or a grenade doing the attacking, then all bets are off. The other possibility is if you have given a suppressing fire. So here I've take PFC Mortel, being badass as usual. If we'd given him a suppressing fire command and he hits, the worst they can get is a morale check. Or if Sergeant Taylor here had an aim fire and he got a hit and he drew a card, none of the previous cases do you have to draw a card. You just do morale checks automatically for suppressive fire, slow suppressive fire, hurry in a building, hurry in the rock. All you got to do is do a morale check. No drawing of cards. But with a rapid fire or aim fire, run and gun, or grenade attacks, artillery attacks, when you're actually getting the attack part, you have to draw a card from your hand. So you pull up your hand, and there are 4 possibilities. One of these possibilities is close call morale check. Close call morale check. This means, once again, you just take a morale check. So let's talk about morale checks for the moment. Regardless of how this came about, artillery morale check, grenade, suppressive fire, a hurry order, whatever. If you have to take a morale check, you just roll against TQ, taking into account wounds and current morale state. So that gets us to wounds and morale states here. What are these morale states and what are the wounds? There's 7 different morale states that soldiers can be in. Most of the time, they're going to be normal. Leave you here. Normal. I'm just going to clone this guy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to move them around here. 3 this way and 3 that way. Let's go up from normal. The next better morale state is bold. At bold, you get +1 to your TQ. It does not modify your weapon skill. If you go up 2, you become aggressive, +2 to your TQ. It does not modify your weapon skill. And the last one, berserk. Up 3 gives you +3 to your TQ and gives you a +1 to your weapon skill. And you cannot give orders. If you're a leader, you lose your leadership ability. Berserk is really the rarest of all these things. The only way you can become Berserk is through rolling a 0 on a morale check when you were already aggressive. It's uncommon enough to be aggressive to begin with, so Berserk, in my experience, hardly ever happens. But we'll cover that in a future lecture when we talk about rallying, routing, and Berserk. Okay, what about the other way from normal? If we go down from normal, one step down is cautious, -1 to your TQ and -1 to your weapon skill. Down 2 is shaken, -2 to each TQ and weapon skill, and the worst, 3 down, is routing, where you have no ability to shoot, no leadership, you're running for cover. We'll talk about routing later. So you can see these will affect your TQ, and TQ affects morale checks. And in addition, there's a couple of kinds of wounds you can experience. There's a light wound and there's a bad wound. Light wounds are -1 to your leadership, TQ, and your weapon skill. Bad wounds are -3 to all those. So if you have to take a morale check, you have to take into account the modifiers for your TQ. You must roll your TQ or less to pass your morale check. So if Soldat Schmidt here had to pass a morale check and he had a light wound, he picked up a light wound, for instance, he'd have to now roll a 3. But let's say we just got a morale check because we had a suppressive fire against him. He's in the house here. We had a suppressive fire. We got a hit. He has to pass a morale check of 4 or less. You just roll 4. That passes. You look the results up on click the morale check table. If you pass, you roll your troop quality or less, there's no effect. Your morale state remains the same. Most of the time it's going to be default normal, so he'd remain normal. If he had rolled a natural 0, he'd gone from normal up 1 to the bold state. But if he failed by rolling greater than his TQ, he'd go down 1 to the cautious state. If he'd have rolled a natural 9, he goes down 2 levels to shaken. That's all the morale check does, is changes your morale state or not. This increase 1 morale level with a natural 0 is the only way to get from aggressive up to berserk. So that's morale checks. If you draw the morale card, if you got a hurry command in hurry territory, like rocks or buildings, if there's a suppressive fire or slow suppressive fire, or if a grenade goes off next door, or if an artillery round lands next door, those are all automatic morale checks. You do it this way. Alright, there's also something called a wound morale check at the bottom here. The last thing to mention is, if Schmidt here would have had a aim fire, and he passes his morale check, he keeps his order. But if he fails his morale check, he becomes a duck back. That's the last thing to mention. Alright, if Schmidt was hit by an aim fire here, Mortel is firing 2 shots in here, gets 2 hits on Schmidt, and he gets to draw 2 cards now. When you get a hit with aim fire, or a hit with a grenade near or a grenade far or artillery, all those hits result in drawing a card from your hand. And let's say I got a light wound and a bad wound. So he gets a light and a bad. There he is. That would automatically, whenever you get a hit, he loses his command and becomes duck back, but it's immaterial at this point because his TQ, you see, is 4. You then have to look at the TQ modifiers for the wounds. -3 for the bad wound, -1 for the light wound makes -4. If an enemy soldier's TQ becomes 0 or less, modified by wounds only, not by morale, he dies. If we have a friendly soldier whose TQ is less than the wound TQ modifiers, so you have a TQ of 4 and you got 5 wounds, you die. If it's exactly equal, you are incapacitated. You fall down unconscious and have to be dragged around by other people. So a 0 modified TQ by wounds for a friendly is incapacitated but kills an enemy. So for grins, let's say that we only got 1 hit and we only got the light wound. He would lose his order and become duck back. He'd be light wound, and then he has to pass a wound morale check modified by wounds and morale. He's got a normal morale and light wound. The light wound is -1, so now he needs a 3 or less. And we roll there and get a 6. He fails. This we look up on the wound morale check. This is 1 step worse than a morale check. In a morale check, a natural 0 increases morale 1. Here, a natural 0 is the only way not to get an effect. If you pass your TQ, you lose 1 morale. If you fail, you lose 2, and if you roll a 9, never a good thing, you lose 3. Well, he rolled a 6 and failed. He'd go down 2 morales, so he'd go from normal to cautious to shaken, and he'd be shaken now. So now he's ducked back. The next time he's activated, he'll go to hide. And from now on, his rifle skill is really going to bite, because he's got a 3 rifle skill with -2 modifier for shaken and a -1 for the light wound. That's -3, so he's already at a 0. He's not even taking into effect weather, range, target, order. Yeah, he's going to be combat ineffective at this point. And if you were going to try to close on him for melee, he's got a 4 TQ to fight with. -2, -1 leaves him with a 1. So he's got to roll a 0 or a 1 in melee to hit you. So he doesn't have very good odds. Looks like a good potential prisoner. So that's light wounds. Bad wounds play the exact same way. If we exceed, like if this, I'd have given a light wound and a bad wound to this person. Now he's dead. So we just remove all these markers and make him a KIA. The last card you could draw is a KIA card, which just directly kills the soldier outright. That's a no-brainer. So close call leads you to a morale check, modified with wounds and morale. Light wound bad wound, given a duck back automatically. Close call only gives you a duck back if they fail their morale check. Light wound, bad wound, duck back. Give them the wound, do a wound morale check. The other thing about shooting is if you do a fire attack and you hit with a 0, you get to go up 1 morale state. So that's another way your morale can go up, is hitting with a 0. If you roll a 0 and draw a close call card, you only get the increased morale state for yourself if they fail their subsequent morale check. If they pass that, it doesn't count. One last complication. We've got skills. Tough and deadly can affect these fire attacks. So let's say we have Ross duking it out with Bach here. And Ross is a Browning man. He can have a rate of fire of 2. He fires twice at Bach, who's tough. Mortel is deadly. And let's do one more here. Let's say Young is up here. Let's have Mortel shoot at Young first. Deadly versus nobody. And let's bring James up here, and he's going to fire as well. Okay. Some combinations here. James is going to shoot at Bach. He rolls and he gets a hit. So he's going to draw a card. But Bach is tough. Tough soldiers get to draw 2 cards and pick the least damaging result. So here, I'm just going to put these to my discard. And we draw 2 cards. A bad wound, and an enemy event, and a close call. So even though I drew a bad wound, Bach says, I'll take the close call. And he would only have to pass a morale check. And he's got a morale of 7, and he's laughing. And he passes it easily with a 0, which means he goes up 1. So shooting at him just pissed him off. Yeah, that's usually how it works for me. So tough gets to draw 2, take the least damaging. Okay, let's say that Mortel, who's deadly, shoots at Young. And he gets a hit. We shot twice, but only hit once. Deadly gets to draw 2 cards. And you take the better of the 2 from the American's point of view. So I got a bad wound and a light wound. We keep the bad wound. We put the bad wound on him. We make him duck back, and he has to pass a wound morale check now. And that would be 4 minus 3 for the bad wound he just picked up. So he'd need a 0 or a 1. And he got an 8. He fails that and goes down 2 to shaken. And then put the 2 things together. What if Mortel shoots at Bach? If he fires twice and gets 2 hits, he's deadly. So his first hit, he draws, gets close call, KIA. He keeps the KIA. But Bach is tough. So he gets to draw another card. So Mortel has to draw another set. Bad wound, KIA. And then Bach has to pick from the least of these. And there's KIA versus KIA, and in this case, Mortel wins again because he's a badass. He just KIA'd him. That was 4 cards just for one fire. For the second fire, bad wound, keep a bad wound. Close call, light wound, keep the close call. In this case, Bach would have said, well, I'll keep the close call. And out of all those 4 cards, you'd get a close call. Of course, it's immaterial because the first shot killed him. So tough, combined with deadly, is going to require 4 draws off the deck to get 1 result. Yeah, that is pretty much the basics of resolving combat. I think it's kind of a sweet system. It's easy to use and easy to remember. Just remember to modify your TQs by wounds and morale. And yeah, that is it. We'll continue with other checks next time, rally checks and other things. True quality checks, which are related to a lot of things. There is a fire morale check with vehicles, but I'm going to talk about that when I get to vehicles. That is pretty much the gist of what I wanted to talk about today. 2 kinds of wounds. We've got morale checks, 7 levels of morale in this game. Tough and deadly play together as well. Hope that helps somewhat, and I will see you guys next time.